WWT presents Meet the Chief.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Meet the Chief. I'm Tracy Byrne, head of go-to-market for cybersecurity here at WWT, and we have a very special guest today, Bob Friday. So, Bob, welcome.
Yep. Thank you, Tracy. Great to be here.
Wonderful. Awesome to have you. You have such an immense background. I have to do a little bit of an elongated introduction just to cover the whole scope of it. So you are the co-founder of Mist Systems, which was acquired by Juniper in 2019, and you are one of the most prominent voices of really leveraging AI in IT right now. So it'll be really interesting to hear your perspectives. I would love for you to give a little bit more background, though, on kind of where you came from prior to Juniper, just kind of looking at some of the standards that you were absolutely critical in implementing and some of your other areas of expertise.
Yeah, Tracy, my standard joke is if you bet $1 40 years ago that I'd end my career as chief AI officer, you guys all be millionaires laying on a beach right now. But I started my career back 4 years ago at Metricom Ricochet building wireless mesh networks. That led into, I don't know, for those who remember, aerospace. That was a co-founder of another company that was focused on actually helping enterprises start to get Wi-Fi into their networks. That was kind of the transition from Wi-Fi and going from a nice to have to a must have in the enterprise space. Then I spent a couple of years at Cisco there, and that's when I finally got I was talking to a couple of customers, and they basically said, hey, we're not going to put your stuff into our network until you can guarantee a great user experience. And that was the beginnings of Mist. That's when there was that paradigm shift from we have to keep AP switches and routers up and running, but we also have to make sure we can guarantee a great client to cloud user experience.
Yeah, that is such an amazing background. And I think it really did, with you being such a pioneer, kind of set you up to be extremely successful as we all navigate AI, which isn't to say that it's a brand new concept, but it is kind of in the same vein of what you're describing. It's how do you take something that's a technological capability and make it extremely user-friendly and functional?
Yeah. I talk to people because like yourself, right? Back in college, I did a neural network back in the 80s. So, but when you look at when did AI go from kind of this research to practical reality thing, I would say it was around 2014. If you look at Google Trends, what you'll find out is 2014 is when machine learning, deep learning, all those searches started to take off. And what you see is around that time, that's when cheap compute and storage took place. The other thing you see in that time frame is really all the open source code, right? And that's when we basically start to see AI become kind of a practical thing. A lot of AI startups started to happen in that time frame.
Yeah. And it has been such an evolution because you'd see it pop up in so many different types of technologies where they're leveraging machine learning. And now it's kind of that place of how do we take something that we have a capability around and operationalize it. And I think in networking, which is really where you guys play so heavily in, there's a lot of barriers to being able to roll that out successfully. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing from your lens in the dynamics of operationalizing?
Yeah, but I usually tell people, AI is ultimately kind of the next step in the evolution of automation. The only thing with this step in automation is most IT departments are used to doing things that are very deterministic, right? We wrote scripts that did the same thing day in, day out. With AI, we're actually building things that are on par with human, right? We're building things that basically do on par. And I would say for most IT departments, they don't trust anyone to touch their network, even humans, right? And I think really the impediment is a level of trust. IT departments are beginning to trust AI assistants in the same way they would trust a new hire, right? So I think that is one of the barriers that we're looking at around IT departments in general, is getting used to how do you trust an AI assistant to actually touch your network.
Yeah. I mean, I think that makes perfect sense, that it is like a trust and kind of credibility exercise. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you how do you elaborate on that? How do you prove that out to them and get them comfortable?
Yeah, so I use my analogy or my example is have you tried out these new self-driving Waymo Ubers yet? Have you actually got into one yet?
Oh, I have not. But my 8-year-old was talking about that on the ride to school today. So,
right. I mean, so my analogy is, hey guys, it is here. If you go to San Francisco, Scottsdale, you order your Uber. Last time I did it last month, it said, hey, this Uber is not going to have a driver. Right. So there's a level of trust when you get into this Uber without a driver.
mm-hmm.
So I think we're at that stage of the evolution, right? AI is real. I think our customers know it now. They know that AI, between ChatGPT, self-driving Ubers, they know it's here. They know it's going to be relevant to their business. They're still struggling through how to sort through the marketing hype and the reality. So that's kind of my analogy of where we are in most industries, whether it's healthcare, networking. People are looking at how to adopt these AI technologies in their business.
Yes, yeah, and it's kind of to double click on what you just said. It's almost like the personal experience that they have with that technology. Luckily, with AI, I feel like it was marketed out so heavily in in the consumer space where there's probably not a single person who hasn't leveraged Chat GPT to help them out. And I think that level of closeness to it does develop level of credibility to understand the use cases elsewhere. So it is moving at a very fast clip, I think, for all of us.
What I try to explain to people is if they're trying to differentiate AI from other automation we've done in the past, I think that one big difference this round right now is really these large models.
Mm-hmm.
The machine learning algorithms have been around for decades, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
What really took off is when you saw computer vision, ChatGPT. These are very large models that are being trained on very large data sets. That is what's disrupting industries right now, right? That's what's industry verticals, where we're actually building things that start to have that reasoning capability of a human.
Yes, yeah. The human piece of this is interesting because you hear a lot of conversation about, is AI going to replace your human workforce? It'd be interesting to hear your perspective on where does it make sense to actually have the human touch or the human oversight, and then where do you leverage AI, and do you feel like that maybe it's just use case specific? But I'd love to hear you kind of talk through that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're going to see, which is kind of what I call practical, that's a development trust. If I'm in the IT department and I have my AI assistant, I may not trust my AI assistant until it proves me that it's earned its trust, right? And this is what I'm saying. It's very like hiring a new intern, right? When I bring this AI assistant onto my team, first of all, I want you to ask me permission. I don't want you to touch anything unless I understand, how you got your inclusion. And then eventually I will start to trust you to actually, and we're actually starting to see that in the networking space where, IT departments have trust their AI assistants to adjust radio resource management, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've been doing that for 20 years, adapting power and channels on networks. We're starting to see IT departments start to trust their AI assistant to actually reconfigure missing VLANs, right? Or find bad cables in their networks. And they're trying to trust, their AI assistant actually issue those tickets without asking. So I think that's the beginnings of that trust mechanism, just like that self-driving Uber, right?
Mm-hmm.
I trusted it. More and more people are going to trust getting into that self-driving Uber as they get used to it.
Yeah, that certainly will be the case. And it's from your perspective, right? Like when we think about the practitioners that have to get their hands on this and kind of make the magic happen, are there certain areas where you see particular kind of technology areas that are more difficult to integrate and kind of get into this, to transition to AI automation?
Are you talking about verticals or specifically the networking space?
I'm specific about technologies in the networking space where there's a little bit of a harder lift.
Yeah, I mean, I think in if you look in the networking space, I don't think it's a harder lift. I think it's more of an evolution.
Mm-hmm.
If you look what we're working on, here at Juniper Mist, it's really around this client to cloud experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about ingesting data from more and more sources, right? So we started the journey at the wireless access point because we were trying to answer the question of why is this user having a bad wireless internet experience?
Mm-hmm.
Then you want to expand that into the switch and the router, and we've now gotten to the point where we're actually starting to ingest data from Zoom and Teams. So you're starting to see in the networking space kind of a convergence of networking and application monitoring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is the interesting thing as we start to evolve this client to cloud experience. The AI assistant is almost vendor agnostic, right? It's sitting on top, ingesting data, trying to maintain that user experience.
Yeah, yeah, and it's actually so important to, like, when we think about like the different personas that are making decisions and working towards goals within our customer organizations. User experience and quick operationalization and efficacy are so important. We're also seeing cybersecurity being a major component of how we look at implementing AI and automation. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you look at cybersecurity concerns and kind of mitigating that?
Yeah. So interestingly, I kind of see if you look at the enterprise networking, we usually have an application group, an IT group, and a cybersecurity group.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of watching all these groups start to converge. There used to be silos. We're starting to see the application monitoring and networking groups come together. We're also seeing that on the security side. And we're also seeing security become more real time. If you look at one of the themes that Mist was really building a day two real time networking paradigm where we can calculate user experience every minute. We're starting to find out that streaming, that paradigm shift from pulling data to streaming data is starting to get into cybersecurity. The same data we're using to calculate that user experience is really the same data you want to use to calculate your risk score. So I think you're starting to see a convergence of security, IT, and application monitoring across enterprise companies coming together.
How do you think that's going to affect kind of the future of this space, right? Like, we're seeing that de-siloing happening, which is absolutely fantastic. I think even from like a business operations perspective for our customers, that's a huge improvement for them and drives so many more efficiencies. But as we look ahead to the next 10 years, what do you think that landscape is going to look like? And what other things do we think are going to be coming out of this for the customers?
Yeah, I mean, I think for enterprise customers, we're going to see this theme of real-time day two operations. Whether it's application, user experience, or security, we're going to start to see enterprise ITs become more responsive real time. I think, on the cybersecurity side, probably when you talk to customers, right, they can't wait hours or days to detect a security alert in their network, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to be able to respond now in seconds or minutes, right? They need to be able to detect those cybersecurity attacks, and that's the escalation, right, in security. The bad guys are getting AI attacks that are very quick thing, and the good guys have to basically respond accordingly with more real-time responses.
Yeah, it is definitely, it's like, you can say it's kind of an arms race, but it's very much the situation that we're in, where it's so easy to launch an attack leveraging AI. Everything's done for you,
Yeah.
and it's very quick. So yeah, there's no way that we're going to have a human stand up against that. Obviously, automation plays such a huge part in that, and also AI, just the continuous learning element of it. So that is really neat, though, to hear from your perspective, just being such a leader in the networking space, to see those two forces combine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's typical, right? And this is kind of the networking and security, right, working together now, because you need to respond quickly in quarantine, right? If you see a bad actor in your network somewhere, you want to quarantine that bad actor very quickly. So I think you're going to see a much more tightly coupling between security and IT going forward.
Yeah, we certainly will. We have, and I think we've seen them in other elements too that I'm sure like you've tapped into. But I think one of the biggest places we saw that widely adopted is that merger when SASE came out, where it was like that same exact just coming together of networking and security teams. So I definitely think that is a trend across the board in all areas, just knowing that they have to work together to function and basically just wrap the security layer around everything that we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at security, right, I think, up to now it's been kind of the take all your log files, stick in big database, try to look for errors. I think we're going to start to see security move the way of kind of what we're doing with user experience, right? And this is kind of this XDR trend, right? Let's make sure we get the data we need to calculate risk scores, right? Maybe I don't need to send everything back to a gigantic data lake. Let's get much more selective and quicker on detecting these security attacks.
One of the things that we, kind of, go back and forth and talk a lot about whenever there's a huge new innovation in technology is how do we think that's really going to affect the current, job landscape? It's this fear of, am I going to be replaced by AI? And it would be really interesting to get your take on, in the world of, like computer science. Is that something that we want to continue sending kids to school to invest in for a career afterwards, or is AI going to play such a big role in that space that it's not necessary?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at there's a World Economic Forum report on this, and you look at other technology transitions, whether it's the car, the internet, definitely there's going to be an impact on jobs going forward. Now, I think the general belief is that, hey, AI is going to probably eliminate some jobs, but create more jobs. Now, what I tell most of my friends is, hey, you need to basically internalize AI. You need to learn to leverage it. It's definitely going to make everyone more productive, right? We've seen that in, one of my higher ed customers, basically, when he basically put cloud AI ops into that network, what he found out was he became less reactive, right? So in his job, he was able to basically expand his responsibilities. What we're seeing with programmers, they're finding out people who are programming, AI is making them much more productive and faster in their jobs. So we're definitely going to see that happen. Is it going to be Star Trek? I mean, the other scenarios, we automate everything to the point that we enter in more of a Star Trek economy.
Yeah, I think that your point is so spot on about the like leveraging AI for the things that are keeping you from being either more strategic or expansive in your responsibility and your role, right? Because it's, I live in the security world, so I'm always translating this and thinking, okay, if I'm trying to navigate a million alerts coming in, I'm just being reactive and responsive, not able to go ahead and be proactive or be a threat hunter, or use that time that I'm saving to go make something more mature and robust, just because you're just dealing with what's coming at you. So I think it's a really similar dynamic just across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely going to see cases like the autonomous vehicles. I mean, in that case, we may actually replace whole segments of driving. Truck driving and stuff may go autonomous. But I think in the larger part, you're going to see AI start to make people more productive, right? Make it more strategic and basically help them get their jobs done quicker.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's going to create new jobs that maybe we can't even fathom this exact moment, because as that technology creates capability, it creates opportunity. And I think that's kind of where there's going to be like a huge natural curiosity as it relates to AI, because there is like this element of like almost instant gratification where you can take something so quickly from imagination to output.
Yeah.
And I think that we're going to see that spread across just that same concept in technology.
Yeah, no, AI made me a poet. I can now write poems and never something new.
That's fantastic. That's a funny transition, because I really did want to spend some time, Bob, like looking at your career history and all of the amazing things you've done. One of the things that I was reading about that I thought was so cool is just your involvement in setting the stage for hotspots. I mean, that's just such a common thing that we all touch on an everyday basis. And to know that you're involved in that and the origins of it is so cool.
Yeah, well, if we're talking about Passpoint and cellular Wi-Fi roaming, yeah, I've been on the mission since my Cisco venture to basically help make sure you guys. Most people don't care how they're connected to the network. We just need to make it easy to be, whether it's cellular or Wi-Fi, which are probably the two most common ways for people to connect to the internet, to make that seamless and secure. Yeah, so that's been a mission I've been on for the last 10 years or so.
Wow. Yeah, that's really neat. So I guess like where that was driving like my curiosity with you is like what in the way that you came up in your career and even in childhood, kind of like what drove you towards wanting to create innovation and be a pioneer?
Yeah, I would tell you the other thing I'm working on is kind of the next generation entrepreneurs. Um, I would say in my career, I ended up doing startups, and I really think about the risk I was taking. So the thing I work with, universities now is kind of like when you're young, that is the time you want to determine whether or not you're actually a startup person or a big company person, right? Because most young people don't really realize, are they willing to take risk or stuff, or can they handle the risk? Um, so I would say when I look back on my career, that's the one thing I didn't realize the risk I was taking, because you're raising kids and family and everything. At the time, I was just trying to make a living. Um, so I would say that was what drove me. I was always on the mission to build something or create something. And I was willing to take a risk, more risk than I realized other people are willing to take typically.
Yeah, I do think that is the only way you're ever going to kind of like forge new paths is you have to be willing to put something to it's not necessarily like a sacrifice. It's like you have to put something out in order to really make those leaps and bounds. And I do think that like in our industry, we would not be where we are today if people weren't willing to take those risks and not always take the safe or predetermined path. So it's really wonderful that you're investing in a new generation of folks that are not only going to be motivated seeing what you've done in your career, but also have some of the tools and learnings just from that experience and going through it.
Yeah. So I encourage, next generation of kids who are in college and stuff. Almost all these colleges, Georgia Tech, Dartmouth, and everything, they have entrepreneurial programs. I would encourage, take advantage, find out if that is a path that's good for you, right? That's a path I think back, 30, 40 years ago didn't exist. Nowadays, most universities have a entrepreneurial program done, so you can actually figure out, are you an entrepreneur at heart?
Yes. And what do you think, like, aside from the willingness to take risks, like, what do you think are the other characteristics? Like, when you see a young person, you think, oh man, I think they've got it. Like, what are you seeing?
Um, I would say now it's easier. Back 30, 40 years ago, I had to buy every book at Stanford to actually figure out wireless or something new. Nowadays, the whole process of learning with the YouTube and the internet and everything, almost anything you really want to tackle, all the tools are there now. It's easy to learn new tasks or new skills very quickly, given you have the ability and the desire.
Yes. Yeah. And I do think, like, to your point, there's like the desire to go do with like, because for all of us, with like, we have everything at our fingertips. And I think it is definitely the willingness to leverage your resources and really like go towards it proactively. And it is a really, probably a really wonderful time to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. What I tell people, anybody who wants to be a data scientist, you can be a data scientist in 3 days. You just have to basically get your Juniper notebook up and running, go to Google, do a search on the tutorial, and within 3 days, you can probably have your first little model trained and up and running. So that is where we're at now in terms of, if you really want to take on something like that.
Yeah, it's very true, and it's funny because it does apply to everything. And just a little personal story: I decided the other day that I want to learn how to play guitar, and it is crazy with the amount of information that's out there. In days, you can be playing a song, and I think it applies to absolutely everything. The information is out there, and there's just incredible minds and resources. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Robert, are there any other kind of like organizations that you're really passionate about and that you spend your time kind of investing in?
Well, I mean, I think as I mentioned before, so I'm a Georgia Tech alumni, so I spend a lot of time with the Georgia Tech Create X program. This is another entrepreneurial program where I think they launch 100 or 200 little startups a year. So where they basically give students a chance to see what it really like is to start a company and get something new up and running from, going from what I call a blank sheet of paper, to something. Because that's really the amazing thing about startups. If you look at MIST and aerospace, you usually start with a blank sheet of paper and you're trying to get some vision to go from nothing to something.
Yeah. Do you think the coaching element is, I would say, like both more important or more difficult getting somebody to a place where they can have like a viable product, right? Like the very beginning creation stages of the startup? Or do you think it's harder at the, okay, we have a mature technology and product, but now how do we make this market relevant and profitable? Like, what do you think is, or just, are they different?
Um, I think the path to success for every new venture or startup, I think there's some general trends. If you talk to venture capitalists about this, they see patterns. I think ultimately, if you talk to most venture capitalists, they'll tell you it's a team. It's really the team and the dynamics when you're trying to solve something new. So I think that is probably the key part of any adventures. And I always tell people, startups, businesses, they're kind of like the ultimate team sport.
Yeah, that's incredibly true. And it is so much. It's about capability, intelligence, but it's also about like how do you cooperate with others, and how do you build on someone's idea and take the skill sets and bring them together into something that's like a unified vision.
Yeah, no, I can tell you when you do a startup, ultimately, you have to have great leadership. You have to have a great CEO, great VP of product management, great VP of engineering, great VP of marketing. It's like a rock star team. You need everyone in the role to, play their role and be good at it.
Yeah, it's very true. Well, thank you so much for sharing those insights. It's really interesting to learn about not only what you're doing in technology innovation, but also in kind of not necessarily recruiting, but in a way recruiting and creating interest for that next generation, so we can just keep expanding further and further out. So genuinely do appreciate that. If we could, yeah, like bring it back to technology and AI and kind of what you're doing at Juniper, are there a few things that you can leave our listeners with as far as what they should be thinking about to start either embarking on leveraging AI for automation or maturing it?
Yeah, I would say for the broader audience, and for those who are basically starting their careers, I would say make sure you kind of internalize this AI transition, and figure out how to leverage it in your job and your life in general. For those who are working in networking and IT, I think the biggest thing is actually production POCs. If you actually want to internalize the difference between the marketing hype and reality, you actually have to get your hands dirty and actually get it up and running.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bob, thank you so much for joining us today and all of your insights. It's been a really fun conversation and getting to know you and kind of where you came from and what your vision is for the future. So we are extremely excited about continuing this partnership and really driving some innovation together.
No, well, thank you, Tracy. It's always fun to talk about cloud AI ops.
It certainly is. Thank you so much.